Hi, welcome back to Tomorrow's Best Practices Today. As always, I'm Clark Newby, and today I'm joined by Michelle Killebrew. Now, Michelle is founder and Chief Go-to-Market Strategist at Pegasus Strategy Company. She's also a senior advisor and CMO evangelist working with Proof Analytics. And before all of that, she was Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of the Americas for NTT, the IT giant. She's also run product and technology marketing teams at PwC. So with all of her background, with her finger on the pulse of things that she's looking at right now, we're very pleased to welcome Michelle Killebrew to the podcast. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Clark. Great to be here. Right now, looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. You're a pretty active part of the Leadtail community and sharing insights with us all the time. So we appreciate you taking time to join us on the podcast and tell us what's going on with Pegasus. Or maybe tell us a little bit about Pegasus and starting Pegasus. I think you've been at it for a little over a year now, and what you're working on and what's got your attention out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, founded Pegasus kind of accidentally after I left my last role and decided to take up some consulting that kind of fell in my lap while I was figuring out which way I wanted to go next. And that turned into a really scalable business, both in terms of clients that came in through referrals with folks that I'd worked with previously, and then started to actually scale into the team structure that we have today. Many of the folks that are on the team I've worked with in the past, which is such an honor, and we're really able to do a lot of different types of solutions for our clients. And namely because, we're not an agency, we're not a consultancy, we've sat in the seat, we understand what you're trying to get done, and can kind of bridge that gap in terms of go-to-market strategy, how you need to think about engaging your prospects and clients, the tech that you need in order to make that a reality, as well as some of what I'll call the marketing fundamentals in terms of product marketing and positioning and all of those things that are really critical, and especially so in this day and age. Last 2025, last year was our first full year in business, and at the beginning of 25, had this really interesting hypothesis. And of course, AI is moving very, very quickly. But then I was thinking, well, as AI and automation becomes more prevalent in the things that we're doing in business, especially in go-to-market, I think the human element and human engagement becomes that much more important than, of course, it already is. And looking back at our client base and projects that we did over the course of 25, I was really astounded how true that actually turned out to be. And namely, it's because the rate and pace of change is so fast, and because a lot of the voices that are dominating the space are either the AI vendors themselves, so they're biased, or AI created content, that people are really leaning into their networks and their peers and asking for, well, what are you doing? How are you approaching this problem? Have you, worked with such and such vendor? All of those types of things, and trying to seek that peer validation information, and essentially, getting somebody to vouch for some of the things that they're considering. And what that turned out in terms of how we were engaging with our clients is many of them had communities that we were supporting or building, strategizing, implementing in some cases to support that. And I think that that's going to be a continued trend.
Yeah, it feels like, you can look at all of the technology curves and the learning curves of the LLMs and adoption curves of the technology and all that to kind of see where we are in this journey. But there's also something that kind of happens in your brainstem around AI, right? Where it's like, is this like you see something that's generated and you see something online and it's constantly like, is this AI generated or is this legit? Or you hear a new observation from a vendor, you're like, is this legit or what's good? And so being able to look your peer group in the eye, your community in the eye, being able to share and compare experience, And I mean, anytime I think there's a big technological wave, you're all going to kind of look around and see like who's doing what, who are the smart people I know, what are they doing? Uh, I heard a terrible story about that. But it does seem to have really amped up. People seem to be recognizing both overtly and kind of in their gut that community is going to be important to getting through this the best way for each organization.
100%. Yeah. And I think that is extended into what I'm seeing in 2026, which is both on, I'll say, the market broadly, and then some of how, like, the conversations that I'm having and that we're having in, I'll say, the space is partnerships and ecosystem. And so you've got the community aspect of how you're sharing ideas and learning from one another. And then on the go to market side, partnerships and, collaborative go to market is really important right now because, oftentimes there are software solutions that need strategic, services to go along with that to make sure that the AI is set up properly in terms of, let's call it product marketing. Do you know your ICP? Do you have strong positioning? Do you have strong messaging? Those types of things. That context in that software needs to be set up well in order for it to deliver effectiveness to its clients. And those are just some of the types of collaborative, partnership models that I think are really becoming more prevalent in 26. And, of course, none of this is new. As you say, every evolution, I think, points down to the fundamentals in some way, but how you actually activate those fundamentals, of course, is dramatically different.
And I know you've put thought into how folks can be thinking about their path through this AI landscape. I wanted to get your thoughts on that individual side as well.
Certainly. I was privileged enough to be able to address a small group of in an organization that was going through the same change. And what I kind of led was almost a visual meditation guided kind of mindfulness journey that really was intended to both empower the individual as well as just remind everybody to take a breath, right? To truly, first of all, the rate and pace of change is exhausting. And those that are in some of these large organizations where their entire business model is changing, it can be particularly daunting. And so definitely take a breath and understand that, it is the human element, is the things that you bring to your work every day that cannot be replicated by AI. And some of that is some of your, innate talents and gifts. Some of those are, the passions and the things that that you have brought in terms of learned experience over the years, and being able to apply that in a way that is uniquely human. And I was recently at, I think it was Human and Tech Week in San Francisco, maybe a month or so ago, and having this conversation around really, if AI is commoditizing a lot of what companies are delivering, what is the intrinsic value that an organization is providing, or is like intellectual property? And at the end of the day, that is the talent that sits in the building, right? And so we're having this really interesting discussion where does that talent become potentially some level of value on the balance sheet, for instance, in terms of that's what's differentiating. It's not the AI, because that becomes commoditized. So there are some really interesting, discussions and counter discussions around, humanness as well as, AI for efficiency, or how you're applying both of those things. And so it's an interesting kind of mind exercise to think through, for sure.
Well, it's interesting on both sides, right? Because, to your point of what goes onto the balance sheet, how putting talent on the balance sheet, um, in some ways, the AI era is a different one in that it's your currency of your experience, your currency of your insight, and all the rest of the things that we're talking about are being put into the system. And once it's in the system, they've got what they need, right? They can replicate that. So how do you talk to folks about kind of staying on the crest of that value wave, where, guys like me, because used to get hired as consultants, for their experience. It's time to bring in somebody with experience, right? They've seen the movie before. Well, if you can put all the movies into your AI and have your team watch them and learn from them, you don't need to be searching around for external consultants like us and advisors to help. So where do you talk to how do you talk to people about that balance of where the value is really, what's the real fulcrum of the value that they're adding?
Well, I think, and I've read several articles about this just kind of as a topic, that the soft skills are no longer soft skills, right? And especially when so much business and so much engagement has happened digitally, being able to collaborate and bring people together and orchestrate some of those human connections and all of those things that may not have been sort of formally recognized. You can have two people, and maybe it's, or a person and, an AI that is applying to something. And in fact, actually, it's bringing to mind, I think, an article that I just saw the headline for in the image. It was quite a captivating image, but it just said nobody's going to follow Claude, right? And so that leadership, that presence really, really matters. They may be able to, help you, but being able to sort of, command and convict, with leadership and inspire a team to achieve greatness, especially of what's next, versus kind of leveraging AI for efficiency against what was. I think that's where some of this is going to start to separate.
Well, you're working with folks every day, working with clients, etc. I've done a lot of this as well, and it's always interesting when you start talking to somebody that you wind up helping out, whether it be strategy or execution, whether it be the positioning, whether it be being a sounding board, etc. And it's interesting sometimes where the conversation starts and what you wind up doing. What a company really needs and what they think they need at the beginning. So, talk to me about that. How do you suss that out with clients, and what are you seeing, particularly in this turbocharged AI environment?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Gosh, well, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to listen, right? And so, any of those conversations, you're trying to listen and understand what they're struggling through. And oftentimes, especially, we're speaking with a lot of folks that are, let's say, general managers, CEOs. And so they're trying to articulate what they understand to be sort of a sales and marketing need, but they are not sales and marketer, say they don't have that depth of knowledge. And so they may be describing to the best of their ability where they see challenges, but it takes a little bit of that expertise to understand and tease out what the underlying cause may be. Because, sometimes this is the result that we're seeing, but they don't understand the root cause, because why would they? It's not their level of depth. And so I think through exploration and research and understanding buyer behavior and all of those types of things, again, back to those fundamentals, that's where you can start to lean in and figure out what some of that core need is, right? And it's different for different organizations, and it's changing very rapidly because they have products that have served a specific client for a really, really long time, and AI may be changing what that client needs. And that client may have revenue pressure, and this organization has revenue pressure, and they're trying to be more efficient with their operations. They're trying to stay, modern with their product and how that product is serving their customers. But there's also this, I'll say, strategic thing that they need to understand. Is their buyer still their buyer, or is their solution now meeting a different market need? Or do they need to change their current product in order to serve their existing buyer? And both of those are pretty big strategic conversations, especially when the rest of the landscape is changing and the CFO is trying to figure out how to not only streamline operations, but invest in AI. And that becomes, especially with all of this tokenomics and, that's becoming more and more difficult to forecast in terms of need. And is it actually paying off the dividends that we needed to, and all of those things? That's a lot of change at once. And so, some of those conversations are, let's start with the basics. Let's kind of do an audit. One of the newer offerings that we're really excited to bring to market is an AEO diagnostic, and this is truly holistic way of looking at how an organization is showing up across multiple LLM models. And it's a hybrid of AI and sort of manual market research that's bespoke to that particular client. But what that actually starts to surface through the course of that research project is, what are the questions that people are looking for in your category? Are you showing up at all, or are you showing up in the right way? How do you think through how you meet your prospect or your client's needs, and are you showing up in the results as part of the discovery, embedded in those answers, all of those different types of questions. And that framework then becomes well, what do I do about that? So if I'm not ranking, how do I need to change? Is it a positioning exercise? Do I need to go through and think through my positioning? Is our positioning strong, but we're just not being consistent with how we're delivering that message? It's a research asset that's sitting on a shelf somewhere rather than articulated in everything that you're doing. Do we need to think through different distribution channels? Do we have enough third-party kudos and references, which is, again, another thing that the AI, the LLMs are really looking for. It's almost an about face of what we did with Google in terms of building keyword density on owned properties. Now you have to cascade and make sure that you have a good reputation across those sort of more online reputation management, and your strategy for gaining that is different. So then you have to reallocate your resources, both in terms of what your teams are focused on and where your budget's focused as well.
That's a great point. The renewed, the amplified importance of your brand reputation, right? I mean, I was talking with someone the other day, and AEO to me, it's one of those things that it forces sort of an annual planning level offsite sort of rethinking, right?
It does.
Like it used to be whatever, September. Well, no, it was like late October because it was supposed to be September, but we ran out of time. And you get everybody together, you're rethinking everything, and you're looking at the numbers, and you're looking at the audiences, and you're looking at the product offering and the roadmap and what's coming. And you have to rethink everything kind of at that level. And it makes me think about, like, in your engagements, so how often do you see folks needing to, what percentage of the time, or in round figures would you say, do folks have to kind of wind up going all the way back to the positioning, to the ICP, to the kind of the truths they hold to be self-evident in order to find the way, to build the way forward?
Yeah.
Is that typical? Do that they, or is it more
I
about
think a
like
lot of that's happening
what you
right
got?
now.
Everybody empty your pockets. Okay, use this, use that.
I think a lot of that is happening right now. 2026 is an interesting year. I don't think anybody can debate that, right? There are a lot of reorganizations that are happening across the tech space, and it's there's a lot of inquiry and people trying to figure things out. In some cases, organizational decisions have been delayed because of the dust that hopefully is settling. I think that seems to be kind of shifting a little bit in the near term. And then you've got all of these new organizations that want to go to market very, very quickly, but they don't know who they're marketing to. So back to the strategy, I think there is this, whether it's a large organization or a small organization, there is a race to adopt the technology from an efficiency perspective, or let's get to market faster, or let's try and serve that much more content, or this many more versions of the content, whether it be industry or persona. And looking at some of the fundamentals I think that's going to be kind of on deck real soon here for a lot of different organizations that need to really do a little self-reflection in terms of, is our core audience our core audience? What problems do they have in this AI landscape? How do we fit into that? Can we evolve with them? Do we need to think completely new and different from a product perspective? And so I think a lot of that if it's not happening already, is pretty much on deck. After this whole kind of operational efficiency little wave that we've had over the last year.
Right, right. And I'm just going to stop there because I think that's, yeah, you can edit this out. Spence, yeah, I'm not going to sprue us one more time on that. Um, yeah, okay. Well, there's another very pragmatic issue is just the economics of last year or so. In the last year,
Yes.
hey man, you don't have to hire some manager level person. We got agents now. What are you doing? These boards, these management teams, our marketing leaders are trying to get somebody hired, a junior officer hired, and it's like, what are you doing, man? Just use agents. And so they pile up all these agents, and now the meter has been running on that for a little while.
Yes.
And so what do you see in your clients around, because the idea is like, yeah, man, we'll just automate these people away. By the way, also wrecking a lot of entry level career paths, et cetera, et cetera. Don't have to worry about that. Let's do 2026. We'll worry about that later. But now these agents are starting to, the tokens are stacking up.
That's
Do you
right.
see people wrestling with that already?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm having conversations with strategic leaders and CFOs that are wrestling with this from a forecasting perspective, and you've got development teams that are also looking at this from how the model consumes different levels of tokens or energy. So that last Claude update, I think it was to Opus. This was the one that sort of started making the headlines in terms of the cost of deploying these things, because although technically the cost per per token came down, it was so much more, it was smarter, right? So it was actually chewing through more of those tokens every time it gave you a response. So that changed the dynamics significantly if you're using that, say, in an organization or even at a team level. And then if you are running agents that are based on that solution and it goes up dramatically. I was listening to a webinar, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and the development team was just talking about sort of being able to fail over between models, whether it be, a model is updated and then an agent doesn't do, it might be smarter, but it's not performing the way that it had been orchestrated to perform. Or if there's an outage, which has happened in the past, do you switch from Claude to ChatGPT as a failover? And so you've got all of these different kind of technological things that are happening on the agent side, and then the CFOs just trying to figure out how to afford it. And meanwhile, you've got these agents that are kind of racking up expenses that are potentially more than a full-time employee. And so I think there's going to be a little bit more of a pendulum swing back to the center around building sort of the combination teams of AI plus human, but leaning a little bit more into the human aspect to be able to both mitigate that. And I'm sure that there's also going to be, some course correction from over reliance on AI, especially just given the former hallucination rate. I have, a suspicion that some of the things that have been pushed out quickly to be competitive may not have been the ideal move to make. So I think some of that's going to be corrected here soon as well.
And you bring up a really interesting aspect that we don't talk as much about on the podcast, but that the resource side, working with the CFO or working even with HR. And so when you have these two flavors of these human employees and these agents, right? Typically, you kind of have a conversation. Too often you have a conversation about an employee, their path, their pay, their cost to the organization once a year, right? And it's like, all right, we got this much, like we got to divvy it up, keep the good ones, strain out, kind of stretch out with the ones that'll stay, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one kind of difficult conversation that is about, that's with the business side of the organization. It's with the CFO. And it isn't really attached too much to go-to-market results, except in terms of, I guess, capacity and things like that, having the team. It's not one of these like, are we going to cover what's the funnel look like sort of conversations. It's about the people and the resource. Now you've got this
Yeah.
relationship with a vendor, which is also always an interesting conversation to have with the CFO, where you're working with a vendor and maybe things are, maybe you're having an overrun or whatever, you're having a negotiation. Now all of a sudden finance gets involved in the middle
Yes.
of your relationship with this vendor, right? And so that kind of weird dynamic that can be touchy and very human is getting pulled into more and more of getting the job done more and more often along the way. Do you see, I guess, have you seen examples of that happening? I have to believe that that's going on more now.
I can't think of any that I'm
Hmm.
close to specifically. I've had conversations around that, but I think a lot of what's happening organizationally at the moment are some more of these. Well, I think there are some smaller solutions that might be deployed at a functional team level, but a lot of these decisions are being made sort of more enterprise wide, and that's a
Yeah,
whole different sort of it's almost like ERP kind of like
yeah, it's
transformation,
a
except
big
it's like,
decision, right?
yeah.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
big purchase. It's a big evaluation. It's a
Mm-hmm.
big, it starts to feel more like a committee thing than a being on point, getting stuff done
Yeah.
thing. In this section we do sometimes overrated, underrated. It's with so much change going on, and with so many voices trying to chime in, ours included, I guess, on what
Yes.
to do about it. Um, in your territory these days, what's something you think is overrated, and something you think a concept or an observation or a solution, whatever it might be, that is underrated?
Yeah, so we started to talk about this, and I think what is overrated is that, and it's still true, I really do believe that it's still true, that there is a misperception that AI is a silver bullet, right? And so, from an efficiency perspective, we expect our teams to be able to deliver 10x what they could previously with the same time and resources. There's an expectation from leaders that perhaps haven't rolled up their sleeve and understand exactly what they're asking, because they grew their career in a completely different paradigm, what they're asking their team to do. And yet, on the flip side of that, what is underrated is what is possible with AI if you're able to co-create with it, and you're able to develop these different strategic or executional um, you know offerings. I've had this conversation with developers, where development teams are being asked to produce 10x code, but you still have to QA it, right? And
Right.
it's coming out so quickly that, are you going to bet your entire application on something that you're not able to even understand, like the code base, because it hasn't been there solid, like, long enough to kind of
Yep.
stabilize? And the same is true on the marketing front, right? In terms of, we are expecting our marketers to create 10x content, but it becomes sort of a push for efficiency, and then that becomes commoditized. Well, why isn't your content performing at the same level? And that's both because we aren't putting the same craftsmanship into that content, and we're also, even if we did, we're swimming in a sea of sameness in a way
Right.
that it doesn't kind of cut through the noise. And
How
so,
come our AI slop isn't outperforming their AI slop?
exactly. So, underrated is the ability to co-create with AI, and overrated is that it's a silver bullet, and you can just set it and forget it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Co-create is such a great term,
Mm-hmm.
um, because and it really does reach back to the work that you're focused on, this human and the human and the AI working together, optimizing that relationship, optimizing what, and kind of being focused on the human side of things that can make the difference, to make 1 + 1 equal more than three in that co-create
Mm-hmm.
uh, equation. I like that framing a lot.
Yeah.
Um, well, speaking of human, I guess the Leadtail community is a community as well. So when you're not
Yes.
helping all these folks figure all this stuff out, what's going on with you these days, Michelle? What's the human Michelle up to
Yeah.
when she's clocked out?
Absolutely. Well, as you may know, we've almost swapped places because I grew up where you are and now I'm living where you grew up.
Right.
And so, as a Florida transplant from Silicon Valley, a lot of it is exploring the area and, really just trying to find time to be present. Walking the dog an awful lot, connecting with folks over coffee. And, when things are going so quickly, I think it's really important to slow down a little bit because it, you can't just kind of get taken with the tide. You have to be like, take a moment and pick your wave, right? And so
Right.
I think that's something that is really important with so much technology, is just take a breath, enjoy some outdoors, connect with humans, and share those ideas. I was having this conversation on LinkedIn, and it just kind of reminded me that at the end of the day, all of this business, we don't sell at the end to an AI. So there is a human at the end of this value chain. I think that we have to remember that
That's right.
whether it's B2B or B2C or B2B2C, whatever you want to think about, um, we have to sort of retain the things that make us us. And so I would encourage people to do that.
Keep us us. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you've got a beautiful setting to do it there in Central Florida.
Absolutely.
I mean, these kind of technologies, we talked about talk about AI, we're talking about the tech stack and marketing, we're talking about all the stuff that the CFO has to help you buy, but just this remote work, right? And we see it as the generations go through, it's so easy to stay tethered more to, it's supposed to give you freedom, doesn't, keeps you more
Yes.
tethered. The human part of the equation is what has to throw the breaker and remove yourself from that and get out and breathe. Good advice.
Absolutely. Yes.
Michelle, God, it's always great to chat with you. Thank you for taking the extra time to lay some thoughts down for the gang here. What would you leave us with? So you're doing a lot of interesting work at Pegasus Strategy. You talked about the AEO assessments, et cetera, et cetera. Where can we get in touch with you? Where can folks find out more about that and keep learning from what you're doing at Pegasus?
Absolutely. Well, you can always go to pegasusstrategy.co or find me on LinkedIn, Michelle Killebrew. And I would love to connect and see what you're up to, and happy to share what we're up to as well.
That's fantastic. Take her up on it, guys. Michelle, as you have just heard, is really on the front of the wave on how real humans are tackling both their outcomes and their career paths in the context of AI, and how they're keeping their humanness and their value and their specialness along the way. It's always so great to chat with you, Michelle. Thank you again for joining us on the podcast. And thanks to all of you, as always, for visiting with us and learning a little bit. Take care, everyone.